I realized I was becoming the worst version of myself around people I once loved. So I had to ask the question, was I growing or was I just surrounded by a familiar noise? The truth was that I was stuck. And letting go of those people was the kindest thing I did for myself. Hey Royal Family, welcome to the front row with myself, Roanna Moodley, and this is Lemon and Honey, where I share my hardest moments in life and what I've learned from it. I was morphing into people that I was not aligning with. I was becoming who they were. I sort of didn't like that version of myself. I was spending time with party-only friends. Friends that I could talk to only when I was in a party. I couldn't call them up when I had something serious to talk about. We didn't have deep conversations. So we had a very surface level friendship. I was fun, I was social, I was up for a good time, and it was not a connection on a deeper level. Because I was always available to all of these friends, I felt drained. I felt like I was going nowhere slowly, and I didn't feel accomplished. The sense of trying to belong made me feel even lonelier than ever, and I lost a sense of myself through it. I was surrounded but unsupported. I had over 20 friends, but I couldn't call any one of them at 2 a.m. in the morning if I had a problem. So at New Year, I pray at midnight with my family every year. So I'm not the friend that goes out with everybody and does the countdown. I did it probably 1 or 2 years, and those years was because I was working in broadcasting and I had to be at an event for the countdown. But if I wasn't working, then I was at home with my family, not doing the countdown, but praying until midnight. So sometimes I would call up my friends and go out after the prayer to meet up with them wherever they are and spend a few hours with them. This one year, I realized I actually don't have any close friends to call up and find out what they're doing on New Year. And it was a loud wake-up call to me, because how was it possible that I could join over 20 plus friends every weekend, but I couldn't find one friend that I felt comfortable calling up on New Year's? And that was the start of my self-reflection journey. There was also instances when I was in university where I would be all alone. When I started university, I had tons of friends, and I would also commute to other universities to meet my other friends. But as I started to focus on developing a career and also focus on my studying, because I couldn't afford to not go to my lectures like most of my other friends. I couldn't skip a lecture. I couldn't not attend because I was not able to pay for studies again. So I couldn't be part of the crowd. And most of my friends came from wealthy backgrounds, so there was a differentiation there. And also, I started to work while I was in university. When I started working, I started to see the deterioration of people who would join me at university. And that was simply because I was too busy to have a social life, because I would be at studio at 5 in the morning, and then I would go to my lectures, and then after lectures I would be back in studio working until 10, 11 at night. So there was no time for me to really have a social life. And because of that, I started to see a loneliness during university. I remember walking in university, and I was there pretty early before my first lecture started. And that's when it hit me. Because I was sitting with myself after such a long time alone at campus, I realized that I actually have no one here that's my friend. And I didn't feel uncomfortable. I think I had gotten very comfortable with being alone and doing my own thing. But it suddenly dawned on me that I don't have 5 close friends that I could call upon at university, because I was busy trying to make this life for myself. So that feeling of being unsupported from a friend point sat with me a little. When you're that young, you feel all sorts of ways, and it hurt a little, but I also just pushed through, because I knew that I wanted something better for myself. When I thought about my relatives who constantly insulted me or made me feel bad, I then didn't want to be around those types of people, because every time I was around them, they made me feel bad about myself. They picked on me. And when I left an occasion that I was around them, I felt drained, and I didn't feel good about being around them. And I didn't feel good about how I felt about them. So I started to internalize the doubt, the shame, the self-censorship, and I didn't want to feel this way anymore. And I knew I had to do something about it. So I looked at myself. I decided that I was going to be taking control of myself. And I needed to get to know myself, because who the hell was I? Was I actually this party person? Was I actually unfriendly? Was I actually not friend worthy? I knew that I needed to do a deep dive about myself. And I took a lesson that I learned in university, which was a SWOT analysis. And I did a SWOT analysis on myself. I wrote down all my strengths. I wrote down all my weaknesses. I wrote down all the opportunities I have or could potentially have. And I wrote down all the things that I felt threatened by, or the things that would be a threat to me. And then when I looked at it, it started to make more sense. And I started to find out things about myself. I realized that I don't like these particular types of friendships. I prefer friendships that are more connected. I love having philosophical, deep connections. I wanted that around my circle. I wanted to connect with people on a deeper level. I didn't want friends that were just party goers and we had no real connection and we didn't really know each other that well. What was the point of that? And then I started to be very selective in my energy. Now, this was the hardest thing for me, because I didn't know who to cut off and who didn't, because I liked all my friends. So what I started to do was to invite them to outings that were not party related. For example, to invite them to lunch and to see what we would talk about. If we were able to connect on a deeper level, if there was something between us that we were connecting on. And I soon realized that there were some people that I actually didn't want to see again. And I'm sure they felt the same way about me, because we just didn't vibe, and that's okay. And then there were some friends that I really wanted to see again, and I knew that there was something that was special about our friendship. So I chose to continue to see those friends that were uplifting, that made me feel positive, or that made me connect with them on a deeper level. And as I continued to do these experiments over time, I then started to learn who my people were. So from having 25 friends, I dropped down to about 5 friends. And then I read somewhere that if you have 5 friends that you can count on, you should consider yourself lucky, because it's very difficult to have close, true friends. And also, it's very difficult to connect to friends on a deeper level. I met the most wonderful friends by doing this exercise. Some friends I have had deep conversations with, and we would meet every Friday because we had a connection like no other. And we were a great group of friends. And then as time went by, life happens and you have to do adult things. But it doesn't mean that those circle of people go away. I'm actually glad that I did the work and I found certain friends that are good for me. Because now, even if I don't see those particular friends all the time, I know that when I do make contact with them, because I have had a connection with them, it's always going to be great when I do connect with them. So that exercise really helped me focus on myself and get to know who I am and what I wanted. It also made me realize what I value the most and if my values aligned with the people that I'm around. I also started new rituals of self-development and finding my own truth and working on myself. So my energy changed, and the things that I wanted or the things that I enjoyed in the past was no longer the things that brought me joy, because I enjoyed waking up earlier in the morning and having an earlier night as opposed to the past. So my shift in the way I saw life also changed. Jim Rohn said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." So if I was joining 5 people that were not serving my higher power, that was not aligned to my values, then I was going to be the average of that. And that didn't sound good to me. I wanted to be stronger. And in order for me to be stronger, the 5 people that I joined on average needed to be way stronger than I was. So even if I was the weakest person, I would still be strong because I'm the average of the 5. Because I learned that you subconsciously become the person that you are around, I was very conscious of who I spent my time with. When people are negative, I become negative, and I've seen that, and I don't like that version of myself. So I try to remove myself from those types of energies as soon as possible. I also realized that when I let go of that type of energy and that type of friendship, it's not betrayal. It is just alignment with my true self. I also learned that loneliness isn't a lack of something. Sometimes it's a pause for deep connection. conversation. And that pause helped me to connect with who I am and get to know what I really want in life. Because toxic circles keep you in loops, but peace creates clarity. If you've walked away from someone you loved because they didn't serve your higher purpose, just so that you could save yourself, I want to hear your lemon and honey story, so drop a comment below. The big lessons that I take away from this is that I am not alone for walking away from the noise. My growth requires space, and space sometimes requires a goodbye. I realized that I don't need permission to choose peace. I just needed the courage. I can love people and outgrow them, and I can release them from grace because I am the most important person in the story. What are you doing to choose yourself? If you liked this video, please do subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Lemon and Honey. Cheers.